Alright, welcome back to another Roblox programming slash game development tutorial, and today we are going to take a little bit of a deeper dive into object-oriented programming. Now, this is one of the most fundamental concepts and programming paradigms out there in the world, and it's a really good one to learn and to master. And because the Lua language is so sophisticated and has so many things you can do with it, it is an object-oriented language, and you know, this is something you should really learn. So I suggest you pay close attention. Now, if you haven't watched my video on how module scripts work and how meta tables work, you will really want to check that out, because some of this stuff will not make sense unless you've seen that. But this will extend a little bit more about what meta tables did versus less about what module scripts did. However, using collection service, you can integrate this all together and essentially have total object-oriented programming inside of Roblox Studio, which makes your code more efficient and effective. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in here. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a script here in server script storage. I'm going to zoom in nice and close here so we can see it. And we're going to delete this. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a table. You can name this table whatever you want. But for this example, because I know we're very familiar with parts, I'm going to go ahead and name this, let's just name this account for this first example, because I think this will be a good example. So I now have this new little account thing here. And essentially what you can do is you can then, create new stuff and, add like meta methods in here. And we've seen all of that. But there's another way to do this as well. And that is to essentially think about all the things that would make up an account. So an account would normally have money and a customer attached to it, right? And a whole bunch of other things to it. So you may have seen stuff like this in Roblox Studio where you have like new. Well, you can actually create your own version of this, and we're actually going to see how. Whenever I call or type in account.new, I can create a function that runs code based on that new account, and don't have to even declare this as like a local. So this is a good example of how you can kind of just get going here inside of this. And I actually do need the table up here. That's why my text editor is not happy. ACCOUNT. There we go. Okay, so I can create, again, this is a nice meta method inside of this table here, and I'm declaring it to be this function. Now, I talked a lot about when you do a dot there, you have to indicate what self is. So self is whatever instance is calling account.new to run, right? So whenever you type in self, think of that as whatever you're going to assign this to later. So I may come down here and create local Anthony. By the way, you should do Pascal Case, Anthony's account here, and do it to an account.new. Okay. This, in this case, is what is assigned to the new instance of this. So this would be essentially what self is talking about here, right? And you can set self to a lot of things, set it equal to a lot of things, but I'm just going to set it equal to an empty table, right? Now, what you can do is you can go ahead and now declare properties about self. So how about self.balance, right? And we can set it to an initial balance here of $100, right? And then you can add a whole lot of other things to this. You can do self.name is equal to account. But this is essentially where you would put all your properties. And then after you're done indicating all your properties and then later your methods here, you're going to return self. Now, what are you actually returning? You're returning to this table. This table here is essentially what gets returned here as information. And then you can actually create, read, update, and delete things about this table. So you can, for example, add stuff to the accounts. So let's go ahead and look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and do self dot, get account balance. I think it'd be self dot get balance. Let's do balance instead. balance. I'm gonna go ahead and do a parentheses there and put an end here. And then what I can do here, I think I need to declare this as a function. My mistake here. There we go. Okay, so now I have a function called getBalance, and that's just gonna go ahead and print the current balance. So we're gonna go ahead and print self.balance. Okay, so essentially this now gets stored in to this table as a new method that you can perform. You can get your account balance, which makes a lot of sense, right? I would hope that a bank would be able to tell you how much money you owe them or whatever, right? I seems to want to put that there. I'd rather have it there. Okay, and now another thing accounts can do is accounts can add money. So you can do function self.add balance. Okay. Now here, I recommend that you pass the amount you want to add. So let's say we want to add, I would just call this amounts as the variable. And then here you're going to do end. It looks like it wants all this stuff here. So I'm going to go ahead and listen to Roblox Studio. And then you're just going to get self.balance. And you're going to, add that. Set that equal to self.balance plus amounts. Right? And then this will add to that. And this is now another method that you can perform with accounts. And that's really, really cool, because essentially what you've done here is you've defined a brand new thing that never existed inside of Roblox before. There's no accounts in Roblox, right? Currently, right now, if I go into any script and I type in, other than this one, let's say I go into a different script. If I go into any other script in the game right now and I go ahead and type in accounts, it's not going to know what I'm talking about because accounts isn't assigned, right? But the exact same programming that I showed you guys is the same way that a lot of these classes were developed. Like vector3.new, for example, creates a new vector and then it asks for parameters for that vector, right? And then there's also different methods that you can perform, right? So here are all the things that you can do. It's very similarly to how this is formatted, right? So originally when the account's not made, it doesn't take any parameters, but you can actually change that. You can pass here init amounts, and this should be lowercase, again using Pascal casing for variables, and then Camal case for methods. Now that's something very important too that I'm just going to touch on here real quick, is whenever you start using object-oriented programming, it's very important that you start being very specific on how you name things. Generally speaking, it's a very good idea to use what is known as Pascal case when naming variables. That is a lowercase first letter for the first word, but then every other word starts with a capital letter. And that way, whenever somebody's reading your code, they instantly know that that's supposed to be a variable. And then the opposite, well, not exactly the opposite, but different for methods. So methods are like functions that objects can perform. Use what is known as Camal case, which is the capital first letter of each word here. That way I instantly know whenever I'm typing it in that it is a method or a function that this can perform. Okay, so let's say that now this account.new takes an initial amount. Well, I can go ahead and specify that initial amount. And let's say, maybe it also takes the name of the account holder, right? I can now pass name here. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this all in action. So I have Anthony's account now. Let's say I'm going to deposit $100, and then the name here is my name, which is Anthony. Okay, and as you can see, it's even telling me what it takes, right? ANTHONY. So just to get started here, I'm going to go ahead and print Anthony's account, so you all can see what's going to pop up here in the console. It passes the table self, right? And then it has these functions here, which are the add balance and the get balance, which we'll use later. But then you can tell that this new instance has my name and my balance, right? And what's cool about this is then I can start declaring things. I can start telling it, all right, cool. So now I have Anthony's account. So if I printed, for example, let's say I did Anthony's account. Let's go ahead and do add balance, and we're going to add a balance of $500. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do Anthony's account, and we're going to go ahead and get my balance. Okay, just like that. So we're going to go ahead and before we add the balance, I'm going to go ahead and print what I had before. So I'm going to go ahead and get my balance before. I'm going to have it do that. I'm going to have it wait. We should probably use task.wait. Task.wait. I'm going to wait a second. There we go. And then it's going to get my balance after here in a second. You're going to see essentially how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and run it now. And as you can see, it showed me my initial balance. It then added to that balance, and then it returned back 600 to me. You can't see that here. We'll go ahead and zoom in here. And this is the whole idea behind object-oriented programming, is very nice setups like this where you can declare specific properties about an object, right? And then also add different methods to that object, right? And this is the whole concept behind object-oriented programming, right? Now, we're going to go ahead and get even more a little bit into the weeds here, but the big thing here is that account, in this case, whenever I do this, this is considered to be a class, where this class is essentially a template for objects, and the specific object that was created, for example Anthony's account here, is considered to be the specific instance or object. And whenever you have the self variable here, it is represented this object, right? So this object here represents by self in here, and as you can see, self is just an empty table, and then you put in these functions and then it returns itself when this is called. So this is going to return this table filled with this information, and then you can add your custom information about the instance, right? So for example, specifically Anthony's account has a balance of 100 initially and has the string of Anthony, right? And you can also add way more other things like an email and stuff like that. But this is just the very bare bones basic of object-oriented programming. I'm going to jump in and we're going to do another video on this, talking about some of the core concepts like polymorphism, inheritance, and some other super important concepts. But this is a very good example of a object-oriented programming setup. And as you can start to see, you know, if this was a customer, for example, you could also have self dot, email, right? And then this would be an email address, right? And then you could have self dot mailing address, right? And this would be, address. And then you would have to declare these up here. So you would have email address, you guys get the point. But the idea here is that you can essentially create whatever you want in Roblox. You can create cars that drive themselves. You can create, whatever. And that is the whole power behind object-oriented programming. So I hope this was a good, nice little introduction, and then I will see you in the next one.